This is from the New York Times. Secret Service director resigns after Trump assassination attempt. Kimberly A. Cheadle gave up her post Tuesday after security failures that allowed a gunman to shoot at former President Donald J. Trump at an open-air rally. I'd like to pause real quick. Can I fix this? They accidentally put at. I'll just say, Kimberly A. Cheadle gave up her post Tuesday after security failures allowed a gunman to shoot former President Donald J. Trump at an open-air rally, who, might I remind everybody, and the New York Times especially, had blood coming down his face from where the bullet struck him in the ear.
Right.
That was not
injured in shooting.
He was shot. Right? And that's just it. I understand the assumption when someone's shot is that they have a bullet wound in their body, okay? But I don't think we need to play semantics in the fact that this guy shot Trump in the ear. Trump was shot in the ear, okay? We just say it like that. Now, I don't believe this resignation is sufficient. I believe that there is either, at bare minimum, criminal negligence, but I think most reasonable people can conclude, based on all of the statements, media reports, law enforcement statements, whistleblowers, etc., that this was allowed to happen. And beyond that, you question, if it was allowed to happen, who's this 20-year-old guy to randomly show up? This idea that it was just a bunch of accidents doesn't make sense. They first said that the roof was sloped, so they couldn't get the law enforcement on the roof. The roof was not sloped. That's a lie. Rep Eli Crane was there standing on the roof, and he's like, what are you talking about? It's a very low grade. Then you had statements that actually, there were law enforcement up there, but they were too hot. Then you have questions about the windows being unsecure, the water tower being unsecure. You have the rooftop that was totally insecure. Donald Trump being released with an active threat. The Secret Service knew of an active threat, and they still released Trump from holding. All of these things could not be an accident. So I'll just say, as she's resigning, there are many members of Congress who are asking the question about, was there in some official capacity, intentional actions taken against Donald Trump? And I know it's very difficult subject matter, but looking at all the evidence that's come out in the media, I don't know how you conclude that the story is just some crazy 20-year-old who got lucky. It doesn't make sense.
And I think one of the other problems is, she resigns and it doesn't make it okay. There still has to be the investigation. Mayorkas has this independent panel that he's saying is bipartisan. Mayorkas himself is being kind of sketchy. People were saying that he was, declining to appear before the House Oversight Committee, even though the DHS is in charge of the Secret Service ultimately. I think one of the big problems is that we know that there are so many unanswered questions. And Cheadle's testimony yesterday really proved that they are not willing to be honest with the public, and they are really trying to sort of cover up, or it feels like they're trying to cover up what happened. And I don't know that we can trust the federal government to investigate itself.
That roof was 150 yards away, roughly, from Donald Trump, and AR-15 fires about 400 yards. That's insane that it wasn't secured. I don't know if it was intentional, but that's either total insanity or they intentionally didn't secure a dangerous shooting spot. And then I was listening to Chris Martinson on Twitter really breaking down the audio from the shooting, and you hear two distinct guns. I mean, it's pop, 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 pop. Like it's three low-sounding, humming shots, and then five like high-pitched ones. He says it sounds directly like it's coming from two different guns. Still, doesn't imply that they let it happen or that they did it intentionally, but like. I don't know. Obviously, it looks like she was covering something up in the hearing yesterday because she was like, I can't disclose that. I can't disclose that. I can't disclose that.
The reason why I wanted to jump from our previous segment, which was talking about the lawfare, the Supreme Court rulings against New York, the actions being taken by New York are unprecedented. Criminal charges against Trump without proper due process, accusing Trump of a crime that Trump has they've never told Trump what crime that was. And in 2020, we had Texas v. Pennsylvania, states lining up against states. And now we're at the point where somehow every possible security failure happened, which allowed a man to shoot Donald Trump in the ear, nearly taking his life, but not for a few millimeters. And the concern is, when this happened, you even have Logan and Jake Paul saying, if that bullet were a few millimeters away, we would have had a civil war. Now, I'm supposed to be the guy ranting on the street corner with the sign saying civil war, but now you've got after this, the conversation has become so ridiculously mainstream. Even Jake and Logan Paul on their podcast are like, wow, we almost had a civil war. I can't believe what's happening in this country. With what we're seeing with the attempt on Trump's life, with the things you've uncovered, A.G. Bailey, about deep state collusion with and censorship. Are we at risk of some kind of national level internal conflict? And I want to preface this with, I am not saying civil war. That's one of the components, but it could be balkanization. It could be something along the lines of individual states like declaring themselves sanctuaries from federal authority to a more greater degree. Do you see that as a possibility in any way?
I think it's certainly a risk. I mean, look, people are fed up. They're tired of it. They're tired of being told how to think, what you can and can't say. They're tired of us eroding our national sovereignty through the Biden invasion. They're tired of the fact that they're working all day, they come home at night, and their dollars don't spend as well because of the inflation. And they're tired of stuff like this. And this woman, refusing to answer questions or provide any kind of transparency or any kind of coherent explanation to what is clearly a massive failure in security protocols. And when I was securing sensitive sites in Iraq as a platoon leader, we never would have allowed, to your point, never would have allowed an elevated platform within 150 yards of the secure site. Like, you don't do that. And that happened here. And there's a reason that happened. And she owes us an explanation. And her resignation does not excuse the officials from that. But going back to my point I made early on, the part of the problem is this rise in the administrative state. We no longer rely on Congress to pass laws and the executive branch to enforce those laws, and we no longer respect state sovereignty because we have this mushrooming administrative state, this alphabet soup of agencies that have this authority and aren't accountable to the electorate because they're bureaucrats that aren't elected. And so we need to slash and burn the administrative state. The overturning the Chevron doctrine, the reinvigoration of the major questions doctrine in the previous two Supreme Court terms, those are weapons in our legal arsenal to fight back against the administrative state.
Do you want to explain the Chevron ruling?
Yeah, so Chevron was a farce that was put forth in the 1980s by the Supreme Court that essentially required the federal judiciary to defer to a federal agency's reasonable interpretation of their own authority. That's an abdication of the court's role under Article 3 to determine what the law is. It goes all the way back to Marbury v. Madison. The courts determine what the law is. And so this never worked. And that, again, it excused Congress from actually doing their jobs and writing statutes, writing laws. It allowed for this mushrooming exponential growth in the administrative state.
It allowed for the ATF to unilaterally declare if you owned a pistol brace, you were a felon. That blew my mind. I'm like, wait. I went to a gun store. I filled out my paperwork. They told me pistol braces were totally fine and legal. And I said, okay. And then a few months later, this story breaks and they're like, by the way, so I call my lawyer and he's like, take them off your weapons and separate them, bring them to a separate property or store them separately. And you're illegally allowed to have them so long as they're not attached. And I said, how did a department, bureau just decide something was a crime?
Luckily, Missouri filed suit and won that lawsuit to put a stop to that. Because you're right. I mean, look, we're always the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. That's the words, shall not be infringed. And in Missouri, Article 1, Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution protects not only firearms, but ammunition and accessories as well, and obligates the state to stand up and fight to protect our God-given right to not only firearms, but ammunition and accessories. So I was proud to file that lawsuit and get a win.
Did the overturning of the Chevron doctrine then eliminate or repeal all these things that had been done using the Chevron doctrine?
No, but it gives us better legal footing to challenge them. And it means that that the tie doesn't go to the agency anymore. The agency's going to have to account for whether or not they're adhering to the plain text of the statutes that authorize them to perform certain functions.
But I like the messaging around this when the Chevron ruling came out. Every mainstream media outlet, a lot of left-leaning ones were like, well, they're not letting experts make decisions. This is so crazy. I mean, it is this.
That's
really
our Constitution.
Right, and it feels like we're in parallel worlds,
well,
right? Where there are some people who are like, well, here's the Constitution, and here is what we would like to happen. And everyone else being like, no, you guys are crazy.
That point was on full display in March when I sat at council table and we argued the case Missouri v. Biden. Mm-hmm. And Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson asked the question, well, isn't it it seems like the First Amendment really hamstrings the government's ability to respond to an emergency. It's like, yes, that's the point. It is an irreducible axiomatic principle that the rights that we enjoy come from God, not man, that the Constitution exists to protect us from the government exists to protect our rights. And in this era, we see government repeatedly weaponized against us. That is antithetical to who we are as an American.
What was the other? You said the Supreme Court overturned the Chevron doctrine?
Yeah, major questions doctrine is the other one.
What's that?
And so that one says that Congress doesn't hide an elephant in a mouse hole. And so you see that in West Virginia v. EPA. You see it in my lawsuit that we won when President Biden first tried to cancel student loan debt. And what the court has said is that, look, if Congress intends to institute a program on this order of like social, economic, political magnitude, Congress has to speak explicitly in the text of the statute. The president has to point to the exact words in the law that allow him to do that, and with a fine print. And Congress has not so authorized the president. And that's why we won that lawsuit. That's why West Virginia won that lawsuit against the EPA. And so those are two independent founts of legal authority to fight back against the rise of the administrative state. But attorneys general will always be playing a game of whack-a-mole. We need Congress and a president who are willing to, again, slash and burn that alphabet soup. I mean, why do we have a federal Department of Education? What role does the federal government? Our founding fathers never intended that bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. would have anything to do with our schools and at the state level. So things like that.
And it's just bloat now. It's just
it's government job welfare.
Exactly. They're one of the concerns that you often hear is, look, yes, but we got to do it slowly because if we slash 5,000 jobs, the economic damage. It's like, no, dude. Like, we're not just giving people money for no reason. That's ridiculous.
I kind of appreciate some sort of national regulation on education in that if one school was teaching someone that 2 + 2 = 3, and then another school is like, no, it's 2, then you're going to have a problem and we're not going to be able to communicate as a society. So I understand, but I don't think we need an entire department. I've learned in recent years, because I agree with you about the bloat. I think it just turns into people getting hired.
The founders intended the federal government to be a government of a limited authority. And under the 10th Amendment, which says that any authority not given to the federal government, denied to the states, is enjoyed by the states and the people of the states. The states are governments of unlimited authority, limited only by their own constitutions or the federal constitution. So the only point I'm making is that education is left to the states, and it's up to states to regulate that. The federal government was never authorized or empowered under the enumerated powers given to the federal government to have anything to do with education. That's just one example. I mean, again, pick out of a hat any federal agency and let's determine whether or not there's enumerated authority for that agency in our Constitution.
But I feel like Americans have been sort of brainwashed to think of it as being the federal government above all else.
Right.
We follow them first. They forget the importance of their state government.
It drives me bonkers when I hear people say, well, the supremacy clause. Like, no. The supremacy clause doesn't mean that the federal government is supreme to the states on all things. That's not what that means. The supremacy clause is an interpretive tool. When you have a federal statute and a state statute that cannot coexist and be synthesized, and that the federal statute is duly constitutionally valid, then the federal statute trumps the state statute. But again, that's only when you have an irreconcilable difference. That rarely occurs. It's an interpretive tool, not an independent fount of legal authority.
What? Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.